This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 328, entitled Masculist Penetration of the Broadcast Media via Major Feminist Events. Description. This flyer proposes a strategy for masculists to penetrate the broadcast media to spread masculist MGTOW ideas to the general public. It is to attract the attention of the journalists present to report on major feminist media events. For example, when two prominent feminist intellectuals debate in public. Masculist leaders, the more articulate and charismatic ones, can then pose a masculist-oriented question in the Q&A session that may attract the attention of the journalists, who later contact the masculist, and so his masculist message gets reported to the masses, which has to happen if a sex war is to be avoided, when men snap at the massive gender injustices committed against them in the divorce courts, where one father in 4 is financially massacred and has his life ruined. Women need to vote with men to menfair the gender laws before men can be persuaded to be fathers again, so that our populations do not get wiped out indirectly by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who have taken over the divorce courts. The flyer itself. Bigger. Maybe too big. Okay. Masculist penetration of the broadcast media via major feminist events by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer proposes a strategy for masculists to penetrate the broadcast media in order to teach the masses, the public, about masculist and MGTOW ideas. In about 2 months from the time of writing this flyer, which was early February 2019, I will attend a public event in Melbourne, Australia, at its exhibition centre, which will consist of 2 prominent American feminist intellectuals who have written books on the desired, in their opinions, directions of feminism. The 2 feminists concerned are Roxane Gay and Christina Hoff Sommers. Roxane Gay is a black, obese, culture critic and feminist who wrote the book Bad Feminist, a New York Times bestseller, which, to paraphrase a review on Amazon.com, is, quote, a call to arms on how society needs to improve, end quote, especially with respect to modern feminism, which he thinks is too preoccupied with white, middle-class feminism, ignoring the feminisms of other female groups, for example, blacks, gays, trans, etc. Christina Hoff Sommer, known in the internet as the factual feminist, is so much less of an essayant fairy than most feminists who don't care about scientific truths. She's complaining bitterly that modern feminism has become too misandrist, equating feminism with man-hating, which is discrediting feminism for most women. These 2 will be intellectually duking it out in a public debate that the public pay money for to get to listen, to get a seat to listen. When I came across an ad for this event, I had an idea. I assume there will be a Q&A, question and answer session, after the 2 of them have debated. I bought a ticket, and I hope to use the opportunity to say something really pithy and striking that will attract the attention of the broadcast media journalists there, who will ask themselves, quote, "Who was that masculist who made such striking points? Let's go talk to him. What he said sounded so important and needs to be given to our media publics." End quote. I will have perhaps 30 to 60 seconds to make my point and hope to attract the journalists so as to launch masculist consciousness and thinking in Melbourne, then Australia, and then to the Western world. I'm wondering what to say if I get to state my question. I'll probably say something like this, and it has to be short and very pithy to attract enough interest. Quote, are either of you, or feminist intellectuals in general, conscious that a sex war is brewing amongst men? You've probably heard how toxic the feminists have made divorce, having taken over the divorce courts, ripping a divorcing father's kids from him with a 90% probability, losing his house to his fluffy ex-wife. A fluffie is a traditional woman who expects to be able to parasite off the money of a man. He'll be made to give half of his wealth to her, forced to pay alimony to her with no legal or moral obligation on her to FIP up, that is, become FIP, equals financially independent person, so that she can continue to parasite off him after the divorce as she did before the divorce. Divorce is now so toxic for men that marriage is toxic for men. So in many Western countries now, 2/3 of young men under 35 refuse to marry, reject paternity, the huge issue, and spend their money on themselves. No culture that financially crucifies and destroys the lives of a quarter of its fathers can survive intact. There'll be an explosion. Men will snap, pick up arms, and go on a sex war. Responsible males, masculist soldiers, will not tolerate that the feminazis indirectly wipe out whole populations, which is what they're currently doing. Gender politicians will be assassinated. Thousands of feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges will be murdered. And if the sex war becomes major, masculist soldiers will go out into the streets and simply shoot the feminazi vermin. Young women need to vote with men, to menfair the gender laws, for example, reform divorce, push for the legislation of the paternity rejection right, so that men can be persuaded to become fathers again. Otherwise, the feminazis will be seen as genociders who need to be wiped out. Please comment." End quote. After that little spiel, I hope that the two of them will be shocked, although probably Summers will be more open-minded towards these masculist ideas, since her attitude is more science-based. She's an academic who thinks like a scientist, who bothers to look at the evidence, whereas Gay is more of a out-and-out misandrist, making offhand negative comments about men in public. If she makes such a misandrist comment in public at this meeting in March, I will harangue her with something like, quote, "If you feel the right as a feminist to piss on men, then I as a masculist will shit on women as the inferior sex, who are dumber than men by 4 IQ points on average, who have 10% smaller brains. So it's men who build and create cultures, and it's women who parasite on them. We men only tolerate women because of their two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. But now the sex bots are starting to come out. Men will prefer to sex their bots, which will have film star faces, luscious curves, creamy, grippy vaginas. In Oz and the US, 40% of women are obese and hence sexually repulsive to men. Fuffs, that's F-U-F, fuffs like yourself, that is, fat, unfuckables, are rejected by most men. Only the ugliest men would be willing to fuck you because they are so desperate they will fuck anything, even you. So there, get a taste of your own medicine, you fat, unfuckable, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi bitch. You should be teaching to young women that if a woman is not nice to a man, she won't get one." I'm hoping I will get the chance to air my masculist talents and catch the attention of the journalists present, who will certainly be at this event because it is the major feminist event of the year in Sydney and Melbourne. If some journalists do come up to me, I can then give them the link to my YouTube/BitChute masculist flyers and to my book on masculism, so that they can learn what masculism is, and then hopefully write about it in their newspapers or invite me to talk on their TV programs, etc. By this means, I hope to launch masculist thinking in Oz, to get the media ball rolling on the other half of the gender story, that is, men's story. Women oppress men worse than men oppress women, because women's oppression is decades long, sustained and major. For example, female financial parasitism, female manslavery, the fluffy feminist hypocrisy in the divorce courts, where women want equal rights with men in the parliaments but behave as fluffy parasites in the divorce courts, a major hypocrisy. Now that men have got into gender politics, for example, via the three major branches of the men's lib movement, that is the MRM, men's rights movement, who push for equal rights for men via changes in the law, the MGTOW, men going their own way, who avoid marriage and reject paternity, spending their money on themselves, and the Masculists, angry, politically active men's libbers. Men will dominate gender politics. This may sound crazy in today's feminist-dominated gender political scene, but whenever men turn their minds to something, they always dominate it, because men are smarter than women. The genii are males, and men have much higher testosterone levels in their blood, so are much more aggressive, ambitious, dogged, and persistent at difficult tasks, much more than women, so the male performance record is greatly superior to women's. Given this male gender political superiority, it's only a question of time before the journalists latch on to the biggest story of the century, that is, the feminazi indirect genocide of whole populations due to their takeover of the divorce courts, making them toxic for men, causing 2/3 of young men to reject paternity. So these feminazi bitches have to be stopped. That is the message I hope to convey to the journalists present at this feminist event. Of course, I will inform you about how it went after the event, but for the moment, to those budding masculist leaders reading this, consider using the same strategy in your country. Choose an event, probably a feminist event, that is major enough to attract the journalists and media people who are interested in gender issues, so that you'll have the opportunity to state your masculist case in public, within earshot of the journalists, so that if you are effective, that is articulate, passionate, and charismatic, then you might attract their attention, giving you a platform to spread masculist ideas to the general public, which is desperately needed. If society does not go masculist in the coming years, there will be a sex war, and large numbers of feminazis will be killed. It is in women's self-interest to vote with men to menfair the gender laws, otherwise men will explode and treat women as sadistic, amoral children who don't care about men's welfare. If men collectively get angry at women, then God help women. The ultimate backup of the law is male force. But when the male law enforcers themselves become angry masculists, the feminazis are fucked. They will lose. Women are powerless towards men physically and will be forced to do what men want. If women want to avoid this scenario, then they need to be informed of masculist ideas and vote with men to menfair the gender laws, that is, divorce reform, bring in the para, etc. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Brackets. Contains links to 300 plus YouTube, BitChute, masculist essays / videos, and to the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.